Off the back of an incredible response to our recent market review, we thought it was time to come back and speak a little bit more about the watch market in 2025. I'm very happy to be joined by Giovanni from EveryWatch. Thanks for
Hey,
being
Nick.
here.
Thank you.
And we are really excited to get stuck into some details. So previously, we talked about the Q3 of 2025 and also some recommendations for value propositions. And I wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who tuned in. The response was overwhelming, to be honest. We couldn't believe how many people viewed the video. I think they had 190,000 views and 160,000 views each. Plenty of comments, plenty of feedback. And from that, it really inspired us to jump back on and talk more about the watch market. It's clearly a hot topic. It's something that people are becoming more and more interested in. So we thought, off the back of a more comprehensive report from EveryWatch for 2025, we would dig in and take a look at some of the information. So Giovanni, I'll hand it over to you just for a quick introduction to the market, and then we'll get stuck into this report.
Awesome. So we've compiled a EveryWatch secondary market movements report for the whole year of 2025. And I think it's great if we just dive into it. Perfect. So let's talk about which brands actually perform the best. And let's start by mentioning the independent market as a sector, which has flourished during this year, mainly led by FP Journe. We all know FP Journe has had incredible raise in total sales, raise in prices, in sales prices, average prices, most prices almost doubled during the year. But there were also some names that are less immediate and less obvious. For example, Grupo Forzi, MBNF, Ferdinand Bertud were some of those names, and then Verneron, Simon Brett, and Reshaping, which have been red hot for quite a while. So those are not surprises. But going back to Grupo Forzi, MBNF, and Ferdinand Bertud, these are some names that I wasn't personally expecting to see come up that high up in the list during this report. And I think it's a signal of the attention and the interest by collectors in the independent market, and especially in value buys, right? So some watches like Grupo Forzi, where you have extreme craftsmanship, they make very few watches. MBNF, a lot of design, but also a lot of craftsmanship. And same thing with Ferdinand Bertud. So collectors are moving away to a certain degree. Of course, there's not many of these watches around, from the main collectible brands, and moving and experimenting more with the independents. Now, in terms of the main brands, we have Audemars Piguet as the standout main brand out of the four brands in terms of performance. They've sold 60% more in terms of total sales value during the year 2025 versus 2024, which is a huge increase. That signals a lot of interest for the brand and a very healthy secondary market. Now, Patek Philippe has also grown to the tune of 45%, but so a little bit less than Audemars Piguet, but more than, for example, Rolex, which was on par with the overall market growth. Rolex accounts for about $5.7 billion in sales, so a third of the whole market, pretty much. And Patek Philippe, therefore, outperformed a bit in regards to the main brands and Rolex specifically. And it grew in price and on average price quite a bit. Now that's because of the high raise in retail prices, the tariffs. Patek responds to the tariffs with a hike of 15%. Then they took it back after the tariffs were reduced partially. So very interesting dynamic there. And then we have Vacheron Constantin, which grew sales by about 70% during 2025. I think of the tailwinds of their very popular releases, especially in the very, very high end of the market, with the Métier d'Art and the most complicated watch that they've presented during the Watches and Wonders, and the 222, which was a huge success in stainless steel. Another success story is Piaget. Now, Piaget, of course, many watches are traded, especially the vintage ones, are traded at or around gold value. And so the huge raise in average price, which is 30%, could be explained by the raise in gold price. However, there's been a 96% increase in total sales, which is absolutely not explained by gold price, and probably by a very popular release with the re-release of the Polo, and just a lot of good activity and releases by the brand. And I think, there's a lot of value in the vintage side of Piaget, with where the consumers and the collectors are looking for value pieces, and those are all in precious metals with stone dials, very often also with stones. So it's a really cool market, and for now a few years in a row we can see the growth. And actually, Piaget is one of the only few brands that has seen the same growth both in the secondary market as well as the auction market.
Yeah, it felt like the stars aligned for Piaget in that way, in terms of collector trends and interests, very much coming into sync with what Piaget is all about in terms of stone dials, precious metal, eccentric shapes. You can start to see why that brand has been particularly popular in the last couple of years, but also particularly in 2025.
And then we have IWC, which has grown quite significantly as well in terms of total sales, about 40%. But what stands out is, I believe this stems from the Formula One movie, which brought a lot of attention to the brand, and somehow to some specific models, like the Big Pilot in general, but specifically to the reference, the Mojave Desert Edition in beige ceramic. And this was very unexpected. This watch grew by the tune of 3,000% in sales. So it means, incredible growth in sales. And it's quite unexpected. Did some celebrities start wearing it all of a sudden? How did it become so popular? I think with Tom Cruise wearing it in Top Gun, maybe that. But the movie is already a few years old. So why the growth in 2025? It's a good question.
It's a great question. If someone knows the answer, please tell us, because we've been trying to work out why such significant growth for that particular model. I think it's a signature watch for IWC, especially that color of ceramic. And yes, when it's strapped on the wrist of Tom Cruise, for example, it's going to help with sales. But yeah, that's a huge jump. So yeah, let us know in the comments if you have any feedback on that.
Definitely very curious about that one. So anyways, IWC had a stellar year. I think they brought a lot of recognition to the brand with the movie activity, which was great. And I would like to jump to the auction market next, which saw quite a bit of sales above $10 million. Actually, 3. And it's the first time ever that there is more than one sale above $10 million in 1 year. And none of these sales came from charity sales. So they're all from actual real sales. And we know that there was one more with the 1518 stainless steel sold in private treaty by Monaco legend for above $10 million. Probably to Mark Zuckerberg. We don't know exactly, but that's what it seems like. So very interesting. And also, in terms of $1 million watch sales, we also talk about that in our previous videos. But they jumped from 63 to 79 in 2025, and that's very interesting. I mean, some of the FP Journes, of course, grew so much in price that they've crossed over the threshold, and some of those were from that. But also a lot of Rolexes, a lot of Pateks, and in general, the market at the very top for collectible watches became absolutely really, really strong and grew the most, I think, out of all the sections of the market.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful bit of information, because I think the top end of the market illustrates the overall health of the industry. And after our trip to Retromobile last week, which was predominantly a car show that also had watches, whether you looked at either of those areas for collecting, the very top end was full of incredibly high value cars and watches in big demand, in high demand. So I think looking at those top end sales, they really show how popular the watch market is right now.
Absolutely. And on the topic, it was incredible for me to see two watches on the wrist of people that visited the show. One was a complete stunner for me. It's not a watch that I would say I love, but it's the Reshaping. I forget the reference, but the one with the smiley and the pineapple on the dial. And I thought it was incredible in person. It's so three-dimensional, and it's a very cool watch. Definitely like super expensive for a very playful watch. So only for a very select audience, but I was impressed. So thank you, my friend, for showing me this. And the other one was I saw a watch on a guy's wrist that reminded me of the GMT Master of Marlon Brando that sold a few years ago at Christie's in Geneva. And I was actually at the auction, so I was able to handle the watch before it sold. And I thought it was it. So I went up and asked, and the guy was actually kind enough to tell me, yes, this is the one. It came from Christie's and so on. And that's a watch that's worth, $3, $4, $5 million. I think it sold for around 4.5. And it's very hard to see this type of watches just in the wild, especially such a unique watch. So that was incredible.
It's so refreshing to see that someone who bought such an important watch, and it's obviously incredibly valuable, was prepared to put it on the wrist and bring it to a show. It's amazing. So cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And then jumping back to the auction discussion, actually very interesting to see the FP Journe ranks third among all brands at auction, only behind Patek Philippe and Rolex. Number 3 is FP Journe in terms of total sales, and it has surpassed for the first time Audemars Piguet at auction. So this is just an insane stat to me, just how collectible FP Journes have become, and yeah, just impressive performance.
Indeed, yeah.
And then jumping on to the another important section of the market, increasingly important, is Rolex CPO. And Rolex CPO exceeded $590 million in sales in 2025, growing 204% year over year. So it literally tripled in sales value in just 1 year. And it now represents about 11% of the overall Rolex secondary market. And I predict that in 2026, we will see this program breaking in the $1 billion of sales, as well as representing about 20% or more of the overall Rolex market. And it's interesting to see that while the CPO sales have grown, the basically the kind of new old stock Rolex's sales have started declining, because I think people don't see the value anymore of paying a premium for those type of watches. They would just rather go and pay for CPO. But something that people don't really talk about in the CPO space, which I think deserves a lot of attention, is that nowadays, if you go and buy your Rolex in the primary market and your dealer participates in Rolex in the CPO program, and you give 2 of your previous watches that you bought from them, or that you bought whatever Rolex watches to them as a trade, they make money twice. Or if you bring more watches 3, 4 times.
Whether we like it or not, the waiting lists, the AD relationships, it's part of the watch landscape now. People, I guess, have to get used to it. And I think on the surface, what a lot of watch enthusiasts and collectors see as a bunch of overpriced Rolexes in dealers, there's actually a lot more going on under the surface. And I think the information that you guys have compiled is really interesting, because that was not my perception of what was happening with Rolex CPO. I thought they were just going to be sitting in cabinets, not selling, but clearly it's working. And I think as we go into 2026, we'll start to see more manufacturers jumping on the bandwagon and trying to implement the same thing. Exactly. Staying on Rolex for a moment, as we're talking and I'm looking at the report, the top 10 models of 2025 keep jumping out at me, specifically number 1, the Datejust. That is something that I never expected, not because the Datejust isn't a big seller, but because I think it's one of those models that's just a perennial favorite. Year after year, people buy Datejust, and whilst everyone's talking about Daytonas and Submariners and GMTs, Datejust comes in at number one.
Absolutely. And I think it would be interesting for the public that's watching to tell us what do they think that the top 10 models are, right? And without focusing on the report, just let us know in the comments and then come back and see if you've nailed it. But yes, absolutely. The Datejust is one of the most iconic watches out there. I was also shocked. I would have said Daytona. Honestly, they're super close. One, it's 1.278 billion, and the other one 1.275 in terms of sales. But I think what's really interesting is that number 3 is the Royal Oak, and leaning by a margin versus number 4, the Nautilus.
And that's shocking. Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah, and I think mostly there's a lot of interest for the Royal Oak, that's undeniable, but the line is much wider, right? There's many more variations and different colors, materials, sizes for the Royal Oak versus what we have for the Nautilus, and that's probably why we see this. And also interesting to note that the Royal Oak plus the Royal Oak Offshore outsell the Nautilus plus the Aquanaut. And the Royal Oak Offshore outsells the Aquanaut as well. And that's super interesting, in my opinion. We were discussing it just before recording, and the Aquanaut line is very, very limited. They only recently started making a few more colorful ways, editions, and different materials, different complications. But until very recently, there were only very few select models, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about this before. The Offshore and the Aquanaut started life at similar times, right? They're both 1990s watches originally.
Yeah.
And if I cast my mind back to the sheer number of offshore references that have been released over time, it's insane. Whereas when I think about the Aquanaut, it's such a tight line. But what that means is, as you alluded to, it's more difficult to sell as a model line when you're restricting what you're doing to a couple of different variations. And I guess, Patek, if you're listening, like maybe it's time to start widening those lines, both in the Nautilus and the Aquanaut, because for me, my perception is there's definitely appetite for it.
Absolutely. And since we're on the topic, what are your expectations for the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the Nautilus coming this year?
For me, I'm desperate to see them release a mid-sized Nautilus again, 3800 remake. I'd love to see it in platinum and an ultra thin version too. And then alongside that, I'd love to see them release a brand new reference, a new complication. I'm gonna put on my wish list a skeletonized version of the Nautilus.
That would be absolutely awesome.
How about you?
For me, I've actually heard the rumor about the 3800. It seems like, it seems like Patek might be doing something around that and a mid-sized Nautilus. I also think that they're going to bring back again a stainless steel full-size jumbo model, which is not in the lineup anymore. Now that they've filled the slot also with the Cubitus, I think they might do it again. And my wish is actually for them to come up with a new complication on the Nautilus line. And I think it would be awesome if they combine best of both worlds. So their most famous complication, the perpetual calendar chronograph, and the Nautilus in one. I mean, we see how popular the 5740 is, which is the perpetual calendar. So just doing a perpetual calendar chronograph, I think, would be epic if executed well.
That is the best of breed for Patek, the ultimate reference. Will they do it? That is the question.
But staying with the models, the biggest gainers in terms of total sales value were very interesting to me. And at number 1, we have the Audemars Piguet Jules Audemars with plus 113%. What do you think, Nick?
This, to me, is a little bit of a window into collector attitude towards AP outside of the Royal Oak, because for so long it's been the one watch company. They've brought in the code 1159, which had a bad start, but it's now starting to find its feet. And to me, there's some appetite there. And as we record this, Audemars Piguet just dropped news of a brand new jump hour watch that they've made from the back catalog. So this, to
Which is
me,
amazing.
which is incredible. Yeah, it's an incredible piece. I'm so happy to see them do that. And to me, it signifies a bit of a change in collector attitudes towards dressy pieces from Audemars Piguet.
I agree. And as you mentioned, the code is actually number 6 on the list over here with plus 91% in sales. So definitely that's heating up. And I think, the new versions are quite nice. I don't know if you think the same, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the code, not the best start, but now all their new models, I'm really enjoying, especially how they've invested a lot of time in the movement side of the code as well. That we've got the RD4, the Star Wheel. It's like they have doubled down on that line and fully committed. And I'm actually glad to see that it's gaining some traction now, because I genuinely think that the code deserves a bit more love.
I agree, and I also think that there's some very good value proposition at the very beginning of the code line, especially with the time only. There is one. I'm a big fan. I think one of the best Royal Oaks out there is the 16202 XT, which is a titanium and palladium mix. Fantastic watch with a red cherry faded dial. And actually, not many know that one of the first editions of the code came in with that dial, the cherry red faded dial, and they are quite affordable nowadays, and I think very good value proposition. But anyways, at number 2, we have the IWC Big Pilot, again, as we were talking about before, plus 102%. Number 3, we have Cartier Panthère, plus 100%. Talk about celebrities having some influence. We've seen this year, and we've done a post on Instagram actually about this, the Taylor Swift effect, that Taylor Swift got engaged in a Cartier watch, not exactly a Panthère, very similar, Mademoiselle, and that watch instantly doubled in value, which was incredible. So some celebrities really have strong powers when it comes to influence and marketing. And I think Cartier Panthère growth is probably a tailwind of that, and more celebrities starting to wearing it and show it off publicly. And then again, we have another dress watch, which is the Vacheron Constantin Patrimony. So again, quite interesting. And if we want to look at some market trends, the main takeaway is that the carbon fiber and ceramics, so like experimental materials, comfortable to wear materials, are doing very, very well compared to the previous year. And actually, white gold and rose gold are gaining market share versus the yellow gold. You might argue that more white gold and rose gold watches are being made today than they were before. So probably that's helping as well, the stat. But definitely, there's something around that.
How much do you think the gold price right now is impacting on people's attitudes towards buying precious metal watches?
I think it's especially important in what I call the floor watches. So watches that trade very close to their gold weight price, right? And it's actually very interesting. As we speak, gold just took a big dip in the past few days. And I think it will be interesting to see that some of these watches, of course, the values, they were trading at gold value, the values went up because of the gold price. Will they come down again with the gold price? I think not, actually. But interesting to see this phenomenon. So I think it influences, but mainly either if the retail price goes up for something that's current production and new, or the bottom value for let's say vintage watches, like a watch will never be sold for less than their gold price, pretty much. So those are the most affected, I would say. And I think before we go to the next page, we should ask our audience, what do they think are the top 10 references by total sold value in 2025?
This is a good one. This is a great one, because I tried to guess before I looked at this report, and I was so far off. Some of the models in there, I understand why they're there, but then specific references, I was a little bit shocked. So yeah, before we flip over, take a moment to have a guess. What do you think are the most popular individual references of 2025?
And let us know in the comment, and let us know if you nailed it or not. Okay, so on with the top 10 references. At number 1, we have the Rolex Daytona 116520. So the first Rolex movement, Rolex Daytona in stainless steel. We have divided both the Panda for the ceramic model 116500, the Panda, so the white dial, and the black dial are counted separately. If we were to count them together, they would be at the top, and so over even the 116520. But anyways, let's keep it separate for this discussion. And at number 2, we have the Hulk.
That was one that really shocked me. I was very surprised about that. Not like everyone knows it's a popular model, like it's a Submariner, right? But the Hulk, like, number 2, it just, yeah, to me it was a little bit shocking. Like obviously we've had green bezels before that with the Kermit, and we've had green bezel references after that with the Starbucks. Yeah, but it's like there's something about the Hulk. I think because it's the only one that's had the green sunburst dial, it's become a bit of a favorite.
Absolutely, I think well-deserved spot over there. Number 3 is extremely interesting, and we have the Nautilus 5712 1A001, so in the blue dial. And just to put it into context, we added again the long tail references, so above the top 10. And at number 26, we have the 5711 with the blue dial. Now, of course, for the 5711, you also have the white dial, you have the green dial, so there's a little bit of a split. And with the 5712, you just have the blue dial in steel. But extremely interesting to see. I wouldn't have thought that, it's almost double the sales of the 5711, which is quite interesting.
That blew me away, honestly. And whilst I personally like the 5712 because I think it brings a little bit of character to the Nautilus line with that asymmetrical layout, I just didn't see it coming in at number 3, especially so far above the 5711. What do you think about that, Giovanni? Why do you think the 5712 specifically has been so popular?
That's a great question. I mean, I like it as well. Probably better than the 5711. I think the times where everybody associated the Nautilus to the 5711 are kind of behind us, and now collectors are looking more for value buys. And I think this is specifically due to the fact that these two watches traded for pretty much the same price for a very long time. But of course, I mean, in the 5712, you have a complication. The data is asymmetric, but I think everybody agrees that it's quite harmonious in its own asymmetry. And so, yeah, it's a fan favorite, I would say, and that's how I justify it. But I was also shocked to learn about this when I was compiling the report.
And staying on Nautilus is similar thing when I look at 5740 as well, and also 5980. Not two watches that I was expecting to be in top 10 of references.
Absolutely, and the 5740 is just a fantastic watch. I mean, in my opinion, it's probably one of the best Nautilus they've done in modern times. The average price point is really, really high. But again, to talk about that top high-end collector line growing. So yeah, that's very, very interesting. And as well, the 5980 in full rose gold is same topic. And then no surprises, I would say, with the Panda ceramic Daytona V1, the first version, the Pepsi, the Batman, and again the black Daytona. And then we have the Starbucks, actually. Quite interesting.
Yeah, it is very. I mean, like you just said, those models didn't surprise me. That, in fact, I was expecting to see those. It's just certain references I was shocked about. What about looking at some of the long tail results as well?
Yeah. So at number 58, we have the Big Pilot Mojave Desert again. So within the top 100 and quite well placed. Really interesting. At number 65, we have the Richer Mill RM30. Also quite interesting, that one. And we have the first Royal Oak at number 90. So with the 15202 in stainless steel, I think that's extremely interesting, and it goes back to what we were saying before, that the Royal Oak line is much wider than the Nautilus line, and so you can see that the Nautilus sales are very concentrated in a few references and very specifically, while with the Royal Oaks, I mean, you have the first one at number 90, but then they are one after the other. And it's really, so you have also the double balance here reference at 107 and many more just after that. And it's really, really interesting to see how the performance of the Nautilus and the Royal Oak are very different. They both perform really well, but in such a different way. And then at number 108, we have the first FP Journe with the Chronometer Sovereign. I mean, just the volume is too low, right, for FP Journe. But to describe the performance of FP Journe this year, I would look at what we call the market signals. And so an FP Journe, its median price is $150,000. And it takes about 36 days to sell. It took about 36 days to sell on average in 2025. One of these watches, most of them are above, of course, 150,000. And the turnover rate, which means out of all the watches that are available in the market, how many are actually selling over a time period, which is 1 year in this case, is 77%. And if we look at a Tudor, with the median price is only 3,500, it's a very good seller. It sells within 36 days as well, and the turnover rate is 76%, so slightly lower than FP Journe. Basically, the key takeaway here is that in 2025, it's easier and faster to sell a $150,000 FP Journe than it was a $3,500 Tudor, which is
Honestly,
insane.
Looking at that stat, I feel like that just sums up the watch market in 2025. Just the way how liquid and in demand top end references can be when and brands in general when they're in demand.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And I think the market momentum was created by some of the movies. It was created by some of the tech entrepreneurs and CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman, which started wearing very publicly collectible watches, both independent but also top-notch Patek Philippe's and the likes. So Royal Oaks and whatnot. So really, really interesting to see this shift. And probably these guys are bringing more and more tech guys into the hobby, and as well, wealthy people into collecting watches, which is probably why we see that top line just really exploding. And I wanted to also talk about the fastest growing references. At number one, we already said it, is the big pilot Mojave Desert with a 3,800% growth, which is completely mind-blowing. At number two, we have the Nautilus 5980 with the jeans strap that was just released 2 years ago. Very interesting reference. I think a modern touch into Patek Philippe. So that was a cool one. The Richer Mill 6702. Do you like it, Nick?
I do actually. Yeah, I do. To be honest, I've come around a lot to RM in recent times, starting to like admire the brand a little bit, and also respect how popular they've remained over time, especially with changing trends in watches. Recently, we've seen like more people wearing dressy stuff, smaller stuff, but RM seems to have maintained its demand over time, and I think it's proved a lot of haters wrong as well, being able to maintain its popularity.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Then we have also the 3503, which is the Baby Nadal. We have the FP Journe Elegant, which grew quite a lot during the year and more than double in price. And last, we have the Yachtmaster in titanium, which is a very interesting one.
Yeah, like we were discussing before, I think it's one of those watches where people genuinely buy it to wear it because it's not flashy. It's completely brushed. It's very wearable and utilitarian. So I think people who buy those generally want to wear them. And also, I don't get the feeling that Rolex is making them in large numbers because I don't see them on the wrists of people very often.
No, absolutely not. Um, I think it's a huge success, and I think we'll see more titanium coming from Rolex, and I hope in the Submariner line very soon. I think that would be
Absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely. And I guess, yeah, you could almost say it is the first titanium watch from Rolex that's wearable. People will say, actually, no, the first serially produced watch was something else. But as we all know, that's a 50 millimeter diver, and it's not really something that you'd want to strap on your wrist every day. So it's like, I almost feel like Rolex has entered the world of titanium with the Yachtmaster, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully we'll see more titanium coming from Rolex sometime soon. And as we were saying before, not all the same brands that performed very well in the secondary market did super well at auction. And as you can see, the auction validation list was mainly dominated by independent brands, with the exception of Breguet, Piaget, and Audemars Piguet. The rest are all independents. They all grew a lot, both in sales and price. We have Number 2 there that did absolutely amazing. A lot of collectors are looking after them. We had Breguet with some of their most important sales this year. Really interesting. We had Urban Jurgensen, which was worn by Timothée Chalamet and some other celebrities out and about recently, which is really interesting. Daniel Roth again, also here. Grubo Forzi again, and of course FP Journe with a growth in sales of 30% with their numbers at auction. It's really substantial, and they've grown in price by 95%. So just literally doubled across the board. Quite interesting. And then we have De Bethune, which also grew 72%. Piaget, good growth in sales and price. And finally, Audemars Piguet with a growth of 25% in sales, which is great.
That's huge. I mean, there's so much information. To me, when I look back at this report and what we've spoken about, I'm seeing the themes. Independence are huge. Datejust reigns supreme on models. And also, Rolex CPO is huge, big news, and also is kind of like carving a path for other manufacturers to get into pre-owned.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think more manufacturers should go that way, especially now that with very very high retail prices, the primary market might slow down. So the brands would be smart to just start and participate into CPO programs and capture some of that market. But I think it's a good way of educating the consumer and helping them get into the brand with some of the previous offerings that they have.
Yeah. Giovanni, thanks so much for running us through that report. Like, there's so much cool information in there and things that I think on the surface people would never be able to see and understand without digging into the numbers. So yeah, really appreciate all the work you're doing with EveryWatch and compiling these reports. They're great to go through. And for everyone watching, really hope you've enjoyed this. We're planning to continue to produce market reports and talk through them. If you like what you're seeing, you're enjoying these, please like and subscribe to the Collecting YouTube channel. And Giovanni, how can people see this report on EveryWatch and look at these numbers in more detail?
You can download the report for free on our website under the analytics section. We'll be posting it on Instagram as well, and a link to download it. So follow us, go to EveryWatch social, EveryWatch official, and thank you so much for listening. And I hope this was interesting.
Great. Thanks again. Please let us know in the comments if you've got any feedback. We'd love to hear what you've got to say. And also, if there's anything you want us to run through, numbers you want us to dig into, let us know, and we'll put that on the list. Thanks again, Giovanni. We'll be back soon.
Thank you, Nick.